All right, let's talk about generative AI. We've all seen the hype, right? The massive investments. But a shocking new MIT study is asking a really tough question. What are businesses actually getting out of it? And, well, the answer might surprise you.
So let's just jump right in with a number that, honestly, it's pretty staggering. 95%. That's how many organizations, according to this MIT report, are getting zero, and I mean zero, measurable return on their Gen AI investments. Not a tiny return. Nothing.
And look, this isn't just companies playing around with pocket change. We're talking about $30 to $40 billion in spending from businesses. That's just a mind-boggling amount of money to be pouring into something with, for most, nothing to show for it on the bottom line.
So, you gotta ask, right? Where is all that money going if only a tiny fraction of companies, just 5%, are seeing any real value? It's this massive gap between the AI hype and what's actually happening on the ground. So what's going on here?
Well, the MIT researchers really dug in. They looked at 300 different AI projects, talked to hundreds of employees using this stuff, and they came back with one single core reason that explains almost all of this failure.
And what's so interesting is what they didn't find. They said the problem isn't the usual excuses. It's not a lack of talent, it's not red tape, it's not even the tech itself. Nope. The core issue, they say, is learning, or a lack of it. Most of these Gen AI systems just don't retain feedback. They don't adapt, they don't get better over time.
And that brings us to this key idea they call the learning gap. This is really the heart of the whole thing. The entire $40 billion question seems to come down to this concept. So let's break down exactly what it means.
Okay, think of it this way. It's like you hire a brand new employee, but every single time you give them a new task, they have total amnesia. They've forgotten everything you've ever told them. That's basically how most of these AI tools are working inside a company. They can't learn from feedback, they don't remember context from one job to the next, so every single time they're starting from scratch. And you can see the result of that amnesia right here. This chart really tells the story. So you've got 60% of companies checking out these tools, just exploring, but only 20% even make it to a pilot program. And then look at that tiny slice, the number that actually gets into production, where it's creating real value, just 5%. Everything else just dies on the vine.
Okay, so the study goes even deeper. It's not just about this one learning gap problem. They actually found 4 specific patterns that separate the winners from the losers, what they call the Gen AI divide. This is the gap between that successful 5% and, well, everyone else.
So let's walk through these 4 patterns. They really paint a picture of why this divide is happening.
First up, limited disruption. You read the news, and you'd think AI is completely changing every industry overnight, but the data says, not so much. Real, deep, structural change is only happening in 2 out of 8 major sectors. For most of the economy, it's barely making a dent so far.
Okay, the second one is really interesting. They call it the enterprise paradox. You'd think the biggest companies with the most money would be winning, right? And yeah, they're starting way more pilot projects. But here's the paradox. They are the worst at actually getting those projects into production. It's the smaller, more agile companies that are better at turning a cool experiment into something that actually works and makes money.
Third, there's a big investment bias. Basically, all the money is going to the flashy, visible stuff. Things like marketing and sales. Meanwhile, the less sexy but super high impact areas like back office operations and logistics, they're getting ignored. And that's where some of the biggest ROI could be.
And last but not least, there's what they call the implementation advantage. And the data here is just crystal clear. Look at this chart. Companies that bring in outside experts to help them, they have double the success rate of companies that try to do it all in-house. That's a pretty huge difference.
So we've got the core problem, the learning gap, and we've got these 4 patterns. So what's the big takeaway here? How does a company get out of that 95% and into the successful 5%?
Well, the study is pretty blunt about why most of these AI projects fail. It's not because the tech itself is bad. It's because the way they're being implemented is just broken. The workflows are brittle, meaning they snap at the slightest change. They have that amnesia problem we talked about, no contextual learning. And maybe most importantly, they just don't fit into how people actually work.
And really, that's the whole ballgame. Success with AI isn't about just buying the shiniest new technology. It's about solving that learning gap. It's about integrating it so deeply into your business that it can actually learn, adapt, and become a real part of how you operate.
And that kind of leaves us with this big, lingering question.
doesn't it? If today's AI can't really learn from experience inside a business, can companies ever truly profit from it? It seems like until someone cracks that code, that $40 billion number is just going to keep going up.